Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Nocturne Society audio broadcast. This is your webmaster Chad. And before we get started, I would like to apologize for any noise or any kind of strange feedback that happens during this broadcast, because I'm still recording this out of my setup in the basement of my home at the current time. And it is winter, it is December, and it is Wisconsin, so the furnace kicks on every once in a while. Hopefully we won't notice it, but in case it does happen, I want to apologize. There's nothing I can do about it because I don't have another place to record currently. So anyway, tonight on this show, we're going to talk about the Bermuda Triangle and some recent findings that they've come up with that actually might crack the case of the Bermuda Triangle. And then later we're going to go over some, try to break down some barriers that people, especially people that are interested in ghosts and the paranormal. There are a lot of barriers that are up that are unnecessary. So we're going to talk about some of those and hopefully make you think outside the box, because there's a box whether you like it or not. And we'll try to get that out of the way. Before we get started, I wanted to give an update on the program we were going to do with the guys telling their ghost stories. Obviously this one isn't it, and I had said it was going to be, the next one was going to be it. And we missed November completely. There was no show in November. This is partly due because of the holidays, and partly due because I seemed like every time we'd set up to go do this show, something would come up. Like the last time, one of the guys was sick, so it didn't happen. And I finally went to them and I said, guys, every time I set up a show, time for us to go record this, it's never a good time. So I was going to just give up and say, this isn't going to happen. But they were very adamant that they wanted to do it. So hopefully we can get a time in to do it. I've been promising this show for a while. I'd love to do it. The guys have some great things, like I've said, and in fact some new things have come to light. Happened to one of them recently, and in our place of business, our new place of business. So that is something we will hopefully get going at. Like I said, especially with December and holidays and all, I don't know if it's going to happen this month. So, if nothing else, next year. And sounds far away, but maybe next month in January. The Bermuda Triangle. Now, there's been. I'm not going to say it's legend because it's not, but there's facts that ships and planes disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. Especially like during World War II, they lost a whole squad of corsairs, just disappeared. And ships have been lost and never seen again. And there was a program on the Discovery Channel that actually, unlike most of the programs that are out there about mystical things, they usually end with nothing solved, and it kind of leaves a question mark. Well, this one seemed to actually get somewhere, and I found it pretty interesting, so I thought I'd share it with all of you who didn't see it. They approached it very scientifically and tried to come up with some reasons why. Obviously, starting with what makes this part of the ocean special, because there's been theories that everything from sea monsters to UFOs, what's causing these things to disappear, but scientifically they started with what makes this part of the ocean special. And it turns out that there's a lot of what they call methane seeps in this area, and this is just gas, methane gas, rising up from the earth through the ocean. So they go to the seafloor, and there's lots of little bubbling, seeps. in the ground that are releasing methane up through the water and then up into the atmosphere. And so they did some tests to see what could make this situation special to interfere with, planes and ships. And it turns out that, they started with boats, and they did some preliminary tests with actual passenger boats, not like huge ships, of course, but just like little Bayliner-sized boats out in the ocean, where they took a tube and put it down on the ocean floor and pumped air through it, and the air would come bubbling up from the ocean around the boat, and they had the boat anchored, and of course the water bubbling up around it, and it got pretty violent and splashed enough water inside that it sunk. Well, they were pretty enthused about that, but they finally realized that no one's going to sit there on the ocean and let these things sink them. So you're going to drive right through it. So they had to come up with something else. Well, they took a laboratory, or a scientific lab that had a good setup. It was for testing ships and things. And it was like a scale model of the ocean, and scale model, can't do a scale model of the ocean, but a scale model of the boat. And they did a boat the size of ocean, one of those oil rig boats that are huge, And so they set it up to scale, and their theory was that if one of these seeps doesn't seep, and they get a pocket of methane building up, and it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then burps this big, huge, enormous, and we're talking big, air bubble, that it could theoretically sink a boat. So in their laboratory test, they tested this, and it didn't seem to matter if they hit the bubble in the middle or either end of the ship. It sunk it, because it was such a huge, the water raising up around it, and the displacement that it caused by hitting the ship. And in fact, they theorized that if a bubble hit in the center of the ship, it would flex the ship and snap it in half. But as far as the scale model, it sunk that as well. It didn't break it in half because there's no weight there, but it sunk it. So they have a pretty good idea that could be the cause of the ships getting sunk. Well, obviously this is like a low percentage chance of this happening to someone crossing the ocean, but then ships don't disappear every day there, so it kind of adds up. It kind of seems like a plausible thing rather than something paranormal happening. But so then they took the methane idea and went to planes. And first they tried seeing if it could ignite, because methane's flammable. And they thought maybe the exhaust from the plane could get hot enough to ignite and blow up the plane. Because there were some reports about when they lost that squad of corsairs, someone out in the ship that was also searching for the lost planes saw a burst of flame in the sky, and they lost the search plane. So they thought maybe that was what happened, because the search plane was never seen again either. So they did some tests. They went out to an old airfield salvage yard and did some tests with airplane engines, and they hooked up a percentage of methane to it and to the exhaust. Let the engine run a while, then they fed the exhaust in through a tube, and it would not light. So it definitely kind of blew that out of the water. But they did find that the oxygen going into the engine that fed the engine, if it had as little as 1% methane, it would kill the engine. And that was a lot lower than they expected. They thought maybe 20%. So they were thinking maybe if you had a pocket of methane that was belched up from the ocean, it could theoretically do that, and that's pretty much the theory. But they thought it would take at least 20%, and it took as little as 1% to kill the engine of a World War II prop plane. So that was very possible that over a certain, they theorize a quarter of a mile of air that has 1% methane in it could totally stall the plane and make it crash to the ocean. And on top of that, the methane has a different density it's lighter than air. And the density change around the plane would throw off the altimeter. And so you're flying along, your altimeter tells you that you're climbing because because it measures density, and the higher up, the less dense. So it measures. It was saying that the plane is climbing. So the pilot, especially at night, is going, "Okay, I'm climbing. I need to push down." Well, that's driving them right into the ocean. So, and it totally corresponds with the distress calls from planes saying that their instruments aren't making sense out there, and then the engine just dies. And this was one of the things that was reported on in some incidents, that people say that their engine just quit before they're never seen again. The radio calls say that their engine just stopped. And they took some pilots and put them in a simulator. And this was a jet simulator for commercial airline. But they simulated a methane interference around the jet. And, obviously they don't suffer from the methane getting into the engine and killing them because they aren't gas-powered prop planes like that. But the density does confuse them. And the pilots, I don't know if they were prepped. They didn't say that they were prepped to know what was going to happen to them or not. But they almost crashed it in the simulator because they were like, this doesn't make any sense, because they could see out their window. The simulator was showing them that they were going into the water, crashing towards the water, and their instruments were telling them they were going up. So it's very, very possible, and I was pretty impressed with the detective work they did, that the methane seeping from the Bermuda Triangle could be causing all the lost planes and ships out there. So, it's not as much fun as UFOs coming down and stealing them, or sea monsters pulling them down into the ocean. But it's definitely far more plausible that this could be happening. So, if you get to catch a repeat of it, I'd recommend it. It was very interesting. And, of course, I spoiled the ending, but, there's a lot more facts in there that I didn't mention. So, definitely worth seeing. And, in fact, I just saw tonight that there's some sci-fi channel program. Of course, it's just a program, and they're discussing the... well, they aren't discussing it. It's just an entertainment show on the Bermuda Triangle, and they're taking a paranormal angle on it. I don't intend to watch it because this looks silly, but if you're into that. Okay, and then on to the next subject. Ghost rules. And what I'm talking about is there's especially when you watch like the Travel Channel shows and stuff on TBS, or on the Travel Channel, and then the TBS has shows as well. They've been playing quite a bit on ghosts and hauntings. And you'll hear people say, "Oh, this little girl, she was brutally murdered in this house, so she's trapped here forever." Or you'll hear, "This person died suddenly, so they just don't know they're dead." And they're stating a fact. What they're saying is, it's like it's a fact that if someone dies quickly, they don't know, and they won't know they're dead, and they'll be trapped there. And these are just like boundaries that don't exist. So So we need to not think about these things. I'll give you more examples here. You'll hear that if you build something on an Indian burial mound, you're going to have ghosts. And if someone has unfinished business, they're going to be floating around for eternity until the problem is solved, or until their body is found. Or these are all totally things that we don't want to think about, because even on many programs you'll hear, like radio programs that are from reputable ghost hunters, you'll hear them say, "Oh, well, the story is this little girl drowned under a bridge, and so she walks the bridge at night, and she'll do it for eternity." And they say it like it's just fact. That's just the way it is. And while there may be spirits or entities in that area, we don't know anything. We don't know that that's the little girl. Someone told me once that we have a brand new house. And they said, "Well, you can't have any spooks there. It's a brand new house. Nobody's died in the house." Like there's a law that says, there's some kind of physical law out there that says that ghosts can't be in a house unless they've died in it. And that's ridiculous, especially since my wife saw something in this house. She told me one day, she said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, the other night I saw a man standing in our bedroom." And this is a brand new house. And while there are Indian mounds near us, anyway, I'll get into that later. She said, I saw this man. I'm like, "Oh my God!" There was a guy in her, and she said, "Oh, I didn't think much about it because I knew it wasn't real." And my wife is very, she doesn't care about the paranormal at all. She doesn't deny the fact that it could be there, but she really wants nothing to do with it. She doesn't get all excited or search for it at all. So I said, "Well, where was I during all this?" And she said, "You were asleep there. I just happened to wake up. I looked over by the bedroom door, and she saw a man standing there." And I said, "Why didn't you wake me up?" And she said, "Because I knew it wasn't real." I'm not quite sure what she means by that. I guess she means it wasn't a real person. And I said, "Well, was he holding a gun? Did he have our stuff in his arms? Were we getting robbed?" And she said, "No, it wasn't like a guy standing there robbing us." And I said, "Well, was it? Well, let's talk about what it could have been. Did it look like an old time? Was it an Indian or someone from the past?" And she said, "No, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't, because he was wearing modern clothes." So she sees a guy standing in our bedroom in modern clothes, who obviously doesn't know that because he didn't die in our home, he's not supposed to be there. And that breaks the rule. And people die suddenly and don't realize they're dead. Well, let's think about that for a little bit. People that die suddenly. All right? People die suddenly all the time in a hospital. In ER, I died in ER. And we had to be defibrillated 12 times to bring me back. But I was in the hospital recently. I had to spend the night. And I talked to one of the nurses that came in there. I said, "How long have you worked at this hospital?" And he said, "I've worked here about 20 years. And I said, "All right, well, I said, "This is probably not the greatest place to mention this, but I have a paranormal website, and according to many paranormal theories, the hospital, this is a place where people die suddenly all the time, and it should be very haunted." I said, "Have you ever had an experience here?" And he said, "I've been at this place 20 years, and I have never heard anyone say anything. I've never seen anything. I've never heard anyone mention anything strange." And he, it kind of set him back, because he's like, "You're right. If you listen to those programs on television and listen to the theories of people of why ghosts exist, a hospital should be the most haunted place on earth." And it's what's funny is you don't hear about a hospital being haunted in general until it's abandoned. Because abandoned hospitals, especially mental hospitals, are like a favorite haunt of ghost hunters. They love to go to these places. And, they're just crawling with spirits when everything's gone. But, I just think that people aren't really thinking about what they're saying. And like you'll hear even George Norrie or on Coast to Coast AM, they'll say, where should you really look for ghosts? A graveyard? And why would you go to a graveyard? Because, that's not where anyone died. That's just where their body is. I mean, granted, if a ghost wanted to return to its body, I guess that's where it would find it. But, I don't think that that's... I don't think that that's a rule. I don't think that you'll find a ghost in a graveyard any more than you'll find it in your own home. And that's something I heard someone say, is that they refuse to do EVP in their own home because that was like their sanctuary, and they didn't want to know that there were entities around them in their house. And I'm of the theory that if you're listening to something, you go looking for something, you'll find it. And it's just like, let's think if you're a ghost, okay? You're a ghost floating around. You're confused, possibly. That's another theory, is that they're confused. They don't know that they're dead. They don't know what's happening to them. And whether that's true or not, I mean, we have absolutely no facts, zero facts, none. So there's nothing for us to base anything off of. But anyway, you're going around, you're wanting to interact, or possibly, let someone know you're there. Are you going to go to someone like my wife, for instance, that wants nothing to do with you and is ignoring you? Or are you going to go to someone that's trying to see you and is listening? Now, in theory, you're going to go to someone that's listening. And I had always thought, they're going to talk to who's listening. You're not going to talk to someone who's not listening. And yet, my wife sees a ghost in our house, and I don't. So, that broke another rule. Our brand new building, as I mentioned, one of the guys said they saw something in our building, and I didn't see something. I saw something strange happen. Our lights in all the offices, as you walk into the room, and it's really annoying, in fact, you walk down the hallway, and the light switches are light sensitive. So you get a dark office, you walk by, and because your shadow casts in there, it makes the light turn on. So it's really annoying as you walk down the hallway, you're flipping on the lights you're inadvertently turning on the lights in every office you walk past. Now, the guy across from my cube, his office, he's been gone on vacation. In his office, the lights in his office have been turning on and off all week. Sitting there, and like 2 or 3 times a day, they'll turn on and turn off, and turn on and turn off. Nobody's walking by, nobody's there, nobody's in there. And in fact, the sensor for his office doesn't. I walked in front of his door, and I'm jumping around, waving my hands, trying to get it to happen, and I couldn't get it to happen because his door, when it's open, covers up the sensor. So his office doesn't do that. I was jumping around in front of the door. I was trying everything to get that light to turn on, and wasn't happening. And in fact, some people came over and asked if he was here, and I said no, he's on vacation. They said, well, that's what I thought, but I keep seeing his light turning on, and I'm thinking he's there. And I said, yeah, I know, I see it all the time too. So why is that happening? Something else I want to mention. Back to the guy who worked 20 years at the hospital. He said although nothing has happened in that hospital, he had worked at a hospital previously, and he did have something strange happen at that hospital. One thing, and it could easily be explained by electronic failure, but he worked in the ER, and they had one room in the ER there that when no one was in there, it would beep a heartbeat every once in a while. And he said they had technicians come in and try to track down why it was doing that, and they found no reason. And that was about the extent of it. And that could easily just be some sort of electrical problem that just wasn't found. So anyway, try to think outside of the box. You hear these theories about what happened to people, don't even listen to it. I mean, take in account that something it could be residual of the death, especially a residual haunting. I don't know if I wanted to get into this, but the different types of hauntings, residual, intelligent, and portal. And I'll go ahead and talk about it. Residual is an event that happened and is playing back. It's like built-up energy. And it plays back, and you see it happen, but it doesn't respond to you. It's like it could be sounds, it could be smells, it could be even a specter. But for instance, someone spent their entire life in one house and walked up and down the stairs. Well, the theory is that energy builds up from doing things over and over and over. And so you could hear sounds of someone walking up the stairs. Every once in a while the energy releases, and you hear the sounds of someone walking up the stairs, or you see someone. But it doesn't respond to you. It doesn't even act like it knows you're there. And it's just like playing a movie back or something. And that's called a residual haunting. Then there's intelligent haunting, which is what everyone considers as the typical ghost. Is something that knows you're there, is floating around, poltergeist almost, doing things or not, and but is interacting with you and is interacting with the environment and is acting like an entity that has intelligence. And then of course the last is the one that I dislike the most, and that's portal haunting, which isn't ghosts. It's not the dead bodies or the dead spirits of humans. It's other things, and that's the ones I don't like because it's hard to relate to. I can relate to a dead person a lot easier than I can relate to some dimensional demon, and that's one of the ideas about portal hauntings, is that it's an opening from another dimension or to another dimension that allows things in. And I had a situation, I don't know if I mentioned this on a previous show, but this woman saw creatures in her house. And she said she was asleep and saw something moving around her bedroom. Sat up and saw this little shadow. It was about the size of a small dog, she said. And she said it had the shape of a dog. And they were running around her house. And when she sat up and flipped the light on, they took off and running down her hall towards her kitchen. She said she had hardwood floors all over in her house. And she could hear the claws clicking on the floor, like if a dog's walking around in a house. You can hear their claws going click, 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 click. She said she heard them clicking and took off after them. She thought there was an animal in her house. And got into the kitchen and nothing there. Poof. Gone. And that happened another night. And she went out and bought a dog. And she said since she had the dog, nothing has happened. So, I don't know. I don't like the idea of things in my house. So that's the one that bothers me the most. But like I said, that's another stereotype. And we have these ideas of, these rules of intelligent haunting, residual haunting, portal haunting that, we shouldn't probably even pay any attention to at all. And so we when you're watching those programs, you see people saying, they take, especially on Travel Channel, where they take you through ghost tours and things. And it's like old lady Winchester in the Winchester Mansion. She walks that was that. I mean, the Winchester Mansion, if you know it, it's called the Mystery House, and it's a strange place, no doubt, without doubt, strange place. That mentally disturbed woman with a lot of money built, and I find it interesting that when she died, she built the house and did seances and did all sorts of things to avoid being in contact with ghosts, or ghosts taking her, or spirits taking her away, evil spirits. Supposedly she was haunted by everyone the Winchester gun ever killed. But they said that, now that she's died, she walks the house. They see the old lady Winchester, and we don't know that. We don't know that that's her at all. And in fact, more and more, I'm more of a skeptic than anything, and I'm not a debunker. I want to make that clear. Skeptic is someone that questions things. A debunker tries to prove things wrong. I'm not trying to prove things wrong. I'm just questioning it. So there is a more believable theory that everything in the world is made of energy, which it is, and energy, if you can control it, voluntary or involuntary, can cause things to happen. That's the danger of going out looking for ghosts. If you see it, you have to wonder, did I create it? And with all these people going through the Winchester Mansion and saying, and the tour guide saying that it's full of ghosts, and that they see old lady Winchester walking the halls as a mystical, a misty spirit. Enough people walking through thinking that could, theoretically manifest the actual ghost itself, and it isn't even there. I mean, the theory about most poltergeists are that it's usually caused by someone in the house, projecting their energy. So, is anything really there? We just don't know enough of anything to know if these are all just hallucinations caused by humans, living humans. So, try to think outside of the box. What I'm saying is, if you're here, you're obviously into the paranormal, and you are looking for answers, and try to think outside, and not keep yourself trapped in the, I'm going to this location because I heard so and so died, and their spirit always walks the earth. Well, it could be something else, like the Bermuda Triangle that is actually methane gas, or there could be an explanation that you're just not thinking of. And I'm one that also, I love to go out and just for the sake of getting scared, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're actually out there looking for answers, try to think of it in a different way. Okay, that's pretty much all I have for tonight. Again, people, I'd love you to post on the forums. I mean, there's 5 members, and like I said, it's a free thing. You just have to sign up to post on there, and it's not my rule. And let's get some chat going on. I mean, nobody's saying anything on there, and I get several hits a day, and I don't know. I mean, I can see through my hit counter that people are there, and I can see that some stay for hours and reading stuff and listening to the programs and stuff. So I know you're there. So can you just let's get some chat going on the forums? Okay. Well, hopefully the next one will be with the guys if we can get it set up, and we'll be doing the stories, and we'll do it in the proper studio. And I hope you guys have a good holiday, and I'll be talking to you again next year.